What is up? Welcome back to the channel. So today, as you can see behind me, we got another 2024 Colorado. Today we're going to be doing a lift kit on it, a diff drop, but we're doing a little bit different kit than what you saw last time. So let's check out what we got today. All right, so this is everything we've got to install today. We went back to Level Up, and this time we're doing their Level 1 Coilover Conversion Kit. So as you can see, we're going to be swapping out the springs entirely. We've got the adjustments for the coilovers so we can adjust that preload. This kit's going to be really awesome, really nice. In the rear, we chose to do the shackle drop instead of the add a leaf. So pretty easy setup in the rear. And then for the front, like I said, this will give you 1 to 2 inches of lift, depending on how high you set that preload. And in the rear, we've got a 1-inch lift. So we'll have this thing riding nice and level, kind of get it adjusted. And then these springs are from Ebach. They come with the kit. So Level Up partnered with Ebach, and we got a really nice setup in the front end there. One other thing that I'm really excited about, because this is kind of a newer product, not a lot of videos out there on it. We went to $5.89 for the differential drop. So this is the differential drop itself right here. And the way this works, normally you have your 2 spacers that go in the front. And what that can do is it kind of puts everything in a bind. It can cause your rubber mounts on the front of your differential to wear out sooner. And once we get underneath there, I'll kind of show you a little bit more about what I'm talking about there. But what this kit does from $5.89 is it's actually going to drop the front and the rear. So by dropping the front and the rear at the same time, we're essentially going to keep those rubber mounts for the front of your differential, keep them from wearing out too soon. And then same for the rear, you've got a rubber mount in the rear, and kind of whenever you torque all that, it's kind of putting everything out of alignment. Not saying that it's a bad setup, but it could cause premature failure in those differential mounts. Along with the $5.89 differential drop, we also got their skid plate reinforcement. So one thing with the stock mounting location is if you do take a good enough hit on your skid plate, I guess there's been reports of maybe it crushing up into your steering components and some stuff like that. So what this is going to do is it's going to beef up the front end of that skid plate. And since we're going to have everything apart, now's a good time to go ahead and knock that out. And then these are from $5.89 as well. These are the rear shock skid plates. So as you can see there, I mean, good thick material, solid powder coating. Everything was packaged really well whenever it was shipped. We've got a QR code for our instructions. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about this $5.89 stuff. For the Level Up stuff, as far as instructions, as usual, we got their QR code that you can scan there. That'll take you to the link for the installation instructions for that. And then one last thing that we've got here, we've got Peak Performance, we've got their sway bar drops. So quick, easy install on those, and I'll show you that whenever we get to them. But we've done those a few times in the past and not much to it. All right, so that is everything we've got to install today. So pretty much what I'm gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get started, get the truck jacked up, get some jack stands under the frame, get the tires off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on just the $5.89 stuff. That way, you know, in case you're looking at doing a $5.89 diff drop, you can kind of just watch that part. Break this video up into chapters. You can kind of check out everything from $5.89. And then from there, we'll move on to the Level Up, the actual lift kit itself, and we'll knock that out. And along with that, we'll throw on our sway bar drops from Peak Performance. And then we'll move on. Last thing we'll do is the rear. I'll probably save these rear shock skids for the end of the video. So we'll start with the diff drop, move on to the lift, and then we'll work on the rear. So let's get the truck in and let's get started. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to do before we get started, before we get this front end jacked up, is I want to go ahead and get some stock measurements. Now with this coilover kit, we can actually adjust anywhere from 0 to 2 inches of lift. Obviously we're going for the 2 inches of lift in the front, the 1 inch in the rear, so it's set nice and level. On that Coilover Conversion Kit, you can adjust your preload. Now, we don't have a heavy bumper and a winch and everything like that, so obviously we don't want too much preload, but at the same time, we want to make sure we get that 2 inches of lift without getting a super rough ride. So whenever we go to set up our coils, I'll kind of go more into that. But like I said, for now, let's get our stock numbers, and then once everything's all said and done, we'll take some more measurements and we'll make sure that we got that 2 inches in the front, 1 inch in the rear like they advertise it. All right, so in the front, we're just under 38.5, about a 16th of an inch under 38.5. All right, and then in the rear, we are at 40 and an eighth. All right, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and get started on the differential drop and then that reinforcement plate for our skid plate. So first thing we need to do, obviously, is we've got these two separate skid plates here. So we're gonna go ahead and get both those dropped down. Looks like, what, 5 bolts on the rear one, and then we got a ton, we got 7 bolts on the front one. So we'll go ahead and pull all these bolts and get these skid plates out of the way, and then we'll be able to take a better look at exactly what we're installing and how we're gonna do this differential drop. All right, so now we got our skid plates out of the way. We've kind of got a better look here at what we're working with. Sorry, I'm laying on the ground right now. I don't have a whole lot of room, so I'm trying to give you the best angles that I can. So this is our differential. We're looking, that's the driver's side over here. We're laying kind of on the passenger side of the vehicle. So the way this is gonna work is you have this cross member here. That is what the rear of your differential mounts to. Now, normally, what you normally see in a differential drop kit is these bolts right here. This is the front of your differential, so it's only mounted in three locations. So normally on the differential drop, you just have spacers that go above this bolt here and then above the other bolt on the front of the other side. So normally we just drop down the front in those 2 locations, and that gives you those better angles. However, it kind of puts all those bushings in a bind, the rubber bushings that are above your differential. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen the 2 bolts holding the front of the differential. I'm gonna remove this rear cross member. I'll support the differential with the jack. Get this whole cross member out of the way, and then we'll get our new cross member installed, and that's going to drop the rear, and then we'll pull out these front bolts one at a time and put in our spacers up above it, and then we'll be done with the differential drop. All right, so I've loosened these 2 front bolts for our differential. The threads are still started, so we'll just make sure everything's maintained in the location that we have it. I just kind of unthreaded them about an inch down on both sides. And then I've got my jack here to support the differential. And then that way it can't really go anywhere, twist on me or anything like that. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start removing this rear cross member. There's 2 bolts on each side. We'll pull those out. And then we'll pull out this bolt here, and then that will free up this rear cross member to drop out of the vehicle.
The mud, the rough. You got it.
Oh shoot, forgot about my camera. All right, so now as you can see, we've got the old bracket dropped out. So I'm gonna take this out there real fast. There's a few things I'm gonna go ahead and move over to this new one. We'll kind of look at the difference. All right, so here you can see the difference. This is our factory one. You know, this thing, it's got some beef to it, but there's a huge difference whenever you're looking at the 589. 589 is a lot heavier. It's a lot stronger, you can tell for sure. And there, like I said, there's a few things. These tabs right here are what your skid plate screws into. So we're gonna go ahead and pop those tabs off, and then we'll move them on to the exact same locations on our new bracket. And then we'll get this cross member back in and reinstall the rear of our differential right here. And that's gonna give us that 1 inch of drop whenever you compare this mounting location to this. Basically just moving it down about 1 inch, and then the added benefit of just a really strong cross member. All right, so now we've got the rear completely installed. This differential bolt here is still loose, but these are fully snugged down on the outsides of our cross members. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to remove the 2 front bolts from the differential. We still have it supported with the jack here. So I'm going to drop down the differential just enough to get this between the mounting surface and the differential itself. We'll slide that in, and then it does come with new bolts and washers that are longer, obviously, so that they work. So we'll go ahead and get these installed on the front. We'll get everything torqued down, and then we're done with this differential drop. Okay, so now as you can see, we got our new 589 cross member installed. We got the drop brackets on the front. So really, that is it. We are done aside from getting these bolts torqued. So we're gonna torque the 3 differential mounting bolts. We're gonna torque all those down to 118. If this was all you were doing, you'd be ready to throw your skid plate back on and you are done. I really like the quality of this. I was really happy with the install. We still got some more of their products to install after this, but for right now, I'm gonna go ahead and get everything torqued down to 118, and then we'll move up to the skid plate support bracket. We'll go ahead and knock that out next. All right, so next up what we have is this bracket from 589. You can kind of see this is our stock support here, and this is just a really thin metal. And I guess apparently if you take a good enough hit to your skid plate, it can crush this, which then in return will put everything up into your steering here. So what this does is it's going to slide on over the top, and that is going to basically just reinforce this whole bracket and give us some more stability. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and install next. All right, so we'll pop out these 2 clips, one in the front, one in the rear. We'll get that kind of wiring harness out of the way a little bit. I'm also gonna come back, and on these clips where the screws for our skid plate go in, I'm just gonna snug those up a little bit. From what I can tell, we're gonna have to slide this bracket up on over them, and I just don't want those to move. And as you can see, like that one's pretty loose. That one's pretty well in place. Anyway, I'm just gonna make sure that all of our little screw spots are gonna hold where we need them to hold, and then we'll just slide this up and on, and then we'll be ready to reinstall our skid plate. All right, so for the AT4X as well as the ZR2, we have this bracket here. That is gonna be a little bit of a spacer. They say, I guess you need a little bit more spacing for that front differential bracket. So we'll go ahead and put this between the skid plate and our new bracket. So our front skid plate only uses these 2 center bolt holes here. So we can actually go ahead and thread in our 2 center bolts here, and then we can put our skid plate up into place, and that'll hold all this bracketry where we want it. All right, so here you can kind of see the back side of that bracket, and then this is our spacer that we added. Initially I tightened these down, realized that our holes weren't quite lined up over here, so I loosened it back up, just readjusted. So now for our secondary skid plate that goes from here back, we're lined up and ready to go. So we got these 2 bolts in here, reinstalled our front skid plate here, and that's that drop bracket. So really easy install. Definitely don't need to jack the vehicle up or anything like that to do it. You really just need to pull your skid plates, throw it on, then put your skid plates back on. There's not much to it. So I'm pretty happy with the fitment. So those 2 wire loom tabs, those aren't going to be able to be reused, so I went ahead and removed those and just clipped them off of that wire loom, which is still plenty secure, not too worried about that. So anyway, that is it for the 589 stuff in the front. What we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and move on to getting the lift installed on the front. We're going to leave this rear skid plate that goes in this general area. We're going to leave it off for now, and we're going to get to working on this lift kit. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to do all my work and show you everything we're doing on the passenger side of the vehicle. Everything on the driver's side is going to be obviously exactly the same, just the opposite side. So what we're going to do first is we need to kind of get everything broke down. You have your wiring here, your ABS line that comes down, and your brake line that's attached to a bracket here. So it's just a little 10 mil. I'm going to remove this 10 mil, the 10 mil for this bracket. And then for your wheel speed sensor, which is on the front up here, you have a T30 holding that in. So I'm going to remove that T30, pull that out, and basically just get all of our brake line and ABS line free from the spindle. And then from there, we'll go ahead and remove the brake caliper and get all that assembly up out of the way. All right, so we got the brake caliper out of the way, wired up. On this side, I ended up pulling off the ABS line from that bracket that we unbolted, just because I didn't want my ABS line getting too tight and there wasn't really any good spots to hook our brake caliper. So anyway, I've got the ABS line, the wheel speed sensor. It's kind of just tucked up here out of the way. So we just got it in a safe location that I don't have to worry about it getting damaged. And what we're gonna do next is I'm gonna go ahead and remove the sway bar link, just this upper off of the spindle. And then I'm gonna go ahead and remove the tie rod as well on the front of the spindle. All right, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and remove our spindle from our upper control arm. So as you can see there, I went ahead and loosened the nut off. I've got a little bit of gap between my spindle and the nut itself. So usually what you can do, and especially on these newer vehicles, it doesn't take much. Usually a little bit of tapping on the side of the spindle will just break it loose. And here in a second, you'll see it pop. It'll pop and kind of just go down to that nut, and then I'll remove that nut the rest of the way. And then from that point, we'll be ready to unbolt our strut and get it out. Come on. There we go. All right, so there you can see it kind of popped and let that tension out. So now there will be a little bit of tension on that nut. So as you come off, just don't get your hands, in this general area. And also one other thing is as soon as you remove that nut, this spindle is going to be free hanging. So you don't want to slam it around. You don't want to damage your lower control arm bolt. So just kind of keep positive control of that spindle. We'll remove this nut, and then we're going to actually wire this spindle up out of the way. Okay, so now we've got our spindle kind of just laid to the side, just kind of gently lay it down. We wire the top to back here so it's out of the way. And now we don't have to worry about our spindle getting damaged or swinging out of the way. So anyway, so now what we can do is we can go ahead and start removing the strut itself. There are 2 bolts down here on the bottom, which come out from the bottom down. So we'll remove those. And then at the top here, might not be able to get the best view of it. There's 3 bolts on the top. So what we'll do is we'll get a wrench up in there, and it is pretty time consuming. We can go ahead and remove those out through the top, or you can open the hood and put a whole bunch of extensions together to get down to them. And you can actually remove them from inside the hood, inside the engine bay. But I will note too, on both sides, the passenger side and the driver's side, there's wire looms that are pushed down onto the top of those bolts. So you'll have to get a pry bar in there, pop those wire looms off, and then remove those top 3 nuts. So that's what I'm gonna do next. I'm just gonna go ahead and get everything unbolted and then remove our strut. Okay, one other thing to add. So for these top 3 bolts on the passenger side, this one that's closest to us, you just can't get to it from the top. On the driver's side, you can get to all 3, and you can get to these back 2 on the passenger. Just that one right there. It's tough to get off, the one closest to us. So anyway, we got all those off, so now we're ready to go ahead and get this pulled out and go get it torn down. Okay, so in case you haven't seen my first video of the first level up suspension kit that we did, or if you did watch the lift kit that we did on the Tacoma, we struggled on that Tacoma. And if there's one thing that scares me whenever I'm working on cars, it's springs under pressure. And that's exactly what we're about to do. We're about to compress this spring so we can take it apart. Whenever we did it on the Tacoma, I actually rented equipment and it was bowed and I did not like it. It was really sketchy. So this is one thing I got, and I know this isn't something that everybody's gonna have. This is from Brannick. Yes, it was like $700. Yes, the only reason I bought it is because I'm gonna be doing this a lot more than the normal person. But if you know somebody that's got one, or if you just wanted to take this part of the install to a shop, I highly recommend that, because this is extremely dangerous. Springs under pressure are extremely dangerous. So if you're not comfortable with it, if you don't have good equipment, just take it somewhere, have them do this part for you. We've got what we need, so we're gonna go ahead and get going on it. So right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna compress the spring. We're gonna remove this top nut, and then we're gonna uncompress it and basically pull everything apart. Of course, once we remove this top nut, we can go ahead and actually pull out the shock. Oh yeah, that's about it. So now as I'm removing this top nut, you gotta watch the bottom, it'll start to spin on you. And then also once that nut comes off, the bottom will drop out. So just be ready to catch it. And so now we can go ahead and remove our shock. Now we don't have a whole lot of pressure on this, but while I'm working over there, I wanna just release the pressure off this. We will be reusing this top cap, so we'll need to go ahead and get it set up. So now we'll just go ahead and remove our spring out of here. Okay, so for our shock assembly, what we need to do is we need to pull off this lower spring perch and then the metal part as well. You can't actually do that because of this bump stop cap, I think is what they call this. So all you gotta do, what I did is just flip it over, and we're just gonna knock that off. Like so. And then, give me a rag. I'm gonna go ahead and wipe all this down, make sure that we got all the dirt and debris, anything else that might be in there that might cause our new stuff not to set flat. Go ahead and just wipe that off and make sure everything looks good. So we're good there. Now with the upper, we can go ahead and just remove this top piece. This will no longer be used. For this piece here, we'll go ahead and just pull it off. Just kind of pops on there. And then you can see your bump stop underneath. Then we'll go ahead and remove our upper spring perch. And then the only other thing that we need for the top is this spacer. It's got the 3 recessed holes in the top, and that's so that it lines up over these. And again, you just want to make sure there's no debris in here. There shouldn't be a whole lot. And what we're going to do is we're going to slide this on. Now it'll only line up one way. You can see it's offset there. So we'll spin it around to the next one. Still doesn't line up. It's not lining up there. Try the next one. And boom. So you want to make sure it's setting flush all the way around. Now, one thing that we did that Level Up actually did not recommend, and I'll show you why we're doing it here in a minute. We're going to go ahead and reinstall this for the simple fact that the dirtier and everything that your shaft gets on your shock, the quicker it's going to wear out. You know, you can get from rocks or anything else, you can get chips in this, and it's just going to decrease performance. I mean, if you can keep the dust and dirt off of that, I think it's a good idea. And we kind of looked everything over, and I think it's better to reinstall this. Now, it's up to you. Like I said, Level Up in their instructions actually did not reinstall this, but we're going to. And it just snaps back on like that. So as far as our top part, that's it. This is all we need to do on the top, and we are ready to go. All right, so the next thing we need to prep is our actual, this is where we would adjust our preload. Now, doing this on the vehicle is possible, but it is not gonna be fun. You're not gonna enjoy it. I promise you that. So the best thing that you can do is kind of get everything preset where you want it. So what I'm doing, right now we're not threaded on. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna thread it all the way on. Now, once I have some threads showing, as you can see there, you can kind of see the top part of these threads right here. So if you wanted full height, what you would do is you would go to where you see the threads and then back it off till they're just underneath, right about there. So that is full height. Now, what this will give you is with this and this, which goes on top, I'll show you where it goes here in a minute. With these two things, it gives you 2 inches of lift in the front. Now, that being said, he does not have an aftermarket bumper. He doesn't have a winch. He doesn't have a whole lot of weight in the front end. So we're gonna back this down just a little, just to give us a little less preload. I still believe that it's gonna give us full height. I mean, I'm only talking like a thread. I mean, we're not talking a whole lot of difference there. But what I wanna do is I don't want a super rough ride. So I'm gonna go ahead and back it down a little bit. And that's simply for ride quality. Now I could go further back, but as I go further down, we're gonna get less and less lift out of this kit itself. And like I said, he's pretty light in the front end. So I think we're gonna be okay right here. Now, if for some reason he did have just a super rough ride in the front, it was really uncomfortable, then we might look at adjusting this. But like I said, we really wanna get it where we think it needs to be right now, rather than later. So now with that, we'll just slide this on. Make sure it's set nice and flush down here at the bottom. And then it comes with this stainless ring, slide it on. Okay, once we slide this on, we're gonna go ahead and reinstall our bump stop cap. The way I did that is I just set it on there, took the metal part that we already took off, and I just hammered it on. Just like that. So now we're setting back where it needs to be. All right, so now what I'm gonna do for my setup, I'm gonna go ahead and get these two things, the spring and our top end, we're gonna go ahead and get it set up in the spring compressor. Whenever you go to reinsert, and now we're working on the passenger side, your Multimatic, this flat part of your shock is gonna go towards the front of the vehicle. So it's gonna be sitting in the vehicle like this. Now for us, since we're working passenger side, that means that this side is gonna be facing out from the vehicle. So I want the Level Up emblems at the top here. I want it facing outboard. So first thing I'm gonna do is kind of figure out where my Level Up is, which is surround on this side. And I'll come around and show you here in just a minute. But I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that that's gonna be outboard on the vehicle. And then we're gonna just compress the spring until I can get the nut on the top. Okay, so sorry, it's kind of backlit here, but you can kind of see there's our level up. The front of the vehicle is that way. The flat part down here. So what you want to do, pretty much because you want these 3 bolts up here to line up whenever you put it in. So we kind of want to go off this level up, and what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of square up the bottom here, kind of right with the level up. And that should get us close enough to get it in, because these 2 bolts have to line up a certain way as well. So this should be close enough for us to get everything set in right where it should be. So what we're going to do next, we're going to go ahead and get this bolt on top tightened down. All right, so once we had the top nut tight there, we're able to go ahead and pull everything out, and everything should be lined up. You can see there, Multimatic, level up at the top. So now we're ready to go ahead and get this back over to the vehicle. Before you reinstall, this is the other part of our lift. So this is what will give us that other inch of lift. This will slide on right on the top. And then you see we got level up, and now we'll just put this back in the vehicle. It does come with new nuts that go on the top as well. All right, and then we'll just make sure the level up's facing us. Get those 3 on top lined up. And then you will have to push down a little bit down here on your lower control arm. You can't really see it because the brake rotor's in the way. Push down a little bit, kind of pop it into place. All right, so now that we got it up and in, I'm gonna throw all the nuts on the top, just finger tight. I'm not really too worried about them. I'll tighten them down later on in the install. Okay, so the next thing we can do is go ahead and reinstall these 2 lower bolts that go in our strut. So that's gonna be pretty tricky, and it is kind of a pain. What I'm gonna do here is I'm actually gonna take a long pry bar, and I'm gonna put it right underneath the shock itself, and I'm gonna kind of work this over where I want it until I can kind of get those holes lined up, and then hopefully, if we're lucky, we can get the threads started on these. And like I said, this is out of all the kits I've done, it's just because you're adding a lift to this. These lower bolts just they're a lot harder to get back lined up where you want them. But with a pry bar, you can kind of manipulate it where you need it and get everything started. All right, that actually went smoother than normal. I got both the threads started, so now we can go ahead and tighten those up. And for the ZR2s, we're gonna torque it down to 37 foot-pounds. Okay, now with that done, what we're gonna go do next is reassemble our upper control arm to our spindle. And the best way to do that is also with a pry bar. Now that we've got more lift to it, it's a lot harder to get this stud down through the upper part of your spindle and kind of get it in place. And again, once you undo your wiring, or anytime you're kind of manipulating the spindle, you just want to make sure that you kind of got positive control on it. I'm glad that that didn't break while I was under there. And what I'm going to do here, make sure that you don't pinch your ABS lines, and then make sure you've got it good and under the coil of the spring of your coilover. And then we're just going to bring it down into the spindle until we can get the thread started. Dadgum. All right, then once the threads are good and started, we'll remove our pry bar. Again, make sure not to damage that, and everything looks good under here. One other thing, so the reason we re-added this, as you can see, it's still gonna slide over your new assembly. And what that's doing is, like, if this wasn't here right now, you would see the shaft of the shock itself. And so that's gonna be exposed to mud, water, dirt, everything else. As you can see right now, everything's kind of enclosed. You can't really get a whole lot of water or dirt or anything up in there because it's a pretty tight fit. It is still loose on this new, what would that be, like preload adjustment area. It's still loose on there, it's not binding on that. And then whenever we compress the shock itself, this is gonna compress with it. So all in all, I think it's just a lot smarter to add this back in just to prolong the life of your shock. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and torque this. So this is gonna be 37 foot-pounds on the first pass. So you want to go ahead and snug it down to 37 foot-pounds. On the second pass, it's going to be anywhere from 90 to 110 degrees. I've been doing 95 degrees. So again, 37 first pass, 37 foot-pounds, and then 90 degrees on your second pass. Now we're good. We're going to go ahead and start kind of reassembling everything else. I'm going to start with the brake caliper. We'll go ahead and get it remounted. Then we'll kind of reroute all our wiring and make sure that it's in. And then on your sway bar links, we can go ahead and reconnect both now, but since we've already done the other side, you want to make sure you wait on your sway bar links to reinstall. Wait until you've done both sides and then reinstall those. So yeah, we're pretty much going to button up everything back to the way it was, except for our tie rod ends. We're going to work on those next. For these brake caliper bolts, we're going to torque both of those down to 80 foot-pounds, and we did use blue Loctite on those as well. And all I'm doing now is just reinstalling that sway bar link. All these little 10 mils, I'm going to pull those out and put our brackets back in, make sure that our ABS line is ran back in, and that wheel speed sensor is back in its little cubby hole there without anything getting damaged, and make sure everything's routed correctly the way you pulled it out. All right, so for our sway bar end links here, where we mount to the spindle, I'm going to go ahead and torque those to 22 foot-pounds. I used a 10 mil and a 21 mil wrench, and the 10 mil is to hold the stud itself to keep it from spinning in your rubber boot, and then the 21 mil is what you're actually tightening the nut with. And then once you get it good and snug, that stud shouldn't move, and we'll go ahead and torque that to 22 foot-pounds. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to install our tie rod sleeves. I think you've already seen me do these in a previous video. Pretty much what it does is it's going to replace this nut right here. So we're going to loosen that nut off. We're going to count exactly how many rotations it takes to get this tie rod end off. And then we're going to remove that nut, put this on, and then make sure we screw on that exact amount of times back on. And then that way we can kind of keep a pretty close alignment. Now, obviously, you know, if you take it to a shop, whenever you get an alignment, if it's a little bit out, they're going to end up loosening all this up and changing it anyway. But that's what we're going to do right now is install these new sleeves. All right, and now we can come back here and reinstall our tie rod end link to our spindle. For your tie rod end links, what we're going to do is we're going to torque this down. This is going to be 2 passes. So first pass will be 26 foot-pounds, and then the second pass will be 85 to 95 degrees. Okay, so that is it for everything out here. You know, everything is torqued back the way it should be, aside from our nuts on the top of our strut up here. So we're going to do those last. We're actually going to get the vehicle on the ground and everything. Just makes it a little bit easier getting in that engine bay, and then we'll get up there and we'll torque all those down. Before we throw the tires and everything on, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and drop down our sway bar and go ahead and get those drop brackets in, and then we'll rebolt our sway bar. So we'll get that knocked out, throw the tires on, get it on the ground, then we'll go up top, we'll get these torqued down. All right, so the next thing we're going to do here is we have our sway bar mounts, and it's on the rear of kind of your differential and your whole assembly up there. Kind of a little bit different than most. Normally your sway bar is running in the front. On these Colorados, it's running in the rear. So we've got 2 on each side, which you can't see that other side. What we're going to do here is we're going to install these drop brackets. And what that's going to do, it's going to drop it down about 1 inch, and it's also going to move it back about 1 inch. So what we're going to do next is unbolt all 4 bolts. The sway bar will drop down. We'll mount our factory hardware back in these recessed holes here, and then we'll use our new hardware and actually mount our sway bar to these new threaded holes on our drop brackets. All right, and now you can see our new Peak Performance sway bar drop brackets there. Moved it down into the rear. Our original mounting location was a lot further up here. So, and what that'll do, kind of just give you a little bit more clearance up here. Of course, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where I'm looking, but it'll kind of get all your components a little bit further away from your control arms. And then it kind of gives it that better geometry there. So it should improve the ride quality. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and get the jack out of the way, and we're gonna reinstall that center skid plate. And then we'll get the wheels and tires on, get the front end on the ground, and then we'll get these upper shock bolts torqued. All right, so we finished up in the front. We went ahead and got all the top nuts torqued down to 47 foot-pounds. And then we went ahead and threw the wheels and tires on, which these are the new wheels and tires. It's gonna throw our measurements for kind of final lift off a little bit. So I'll kind of calculate all that in at the end. And these are 315/70 R17s. So I'm pretty sure that's right at a 1235, 1250. So yeah, as you can see, we already checked it out, plenty of clearance. You know, we went ahead and drove it around just for a second, turned it around, and then now we are set up to go ahead and get started in the back. So what we're gonna do next is go ahead and get started on the lift, and then once we knock out the lift, we'll go ahead and throw those rear shock skid plates on. But first, let's get it up in the air and get it lifted. I've got the frame supported by jack stands. I left my jack underneath the axle itself. So with this style of lift, you know, last time we did the add a leaf to get the 1 inch in the rear. This time we're doing a shackle drop. So this is your rear shackle, 4 bolts here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this on both sides. And it's a 21 mil bolt. The nuts themselves are actually mounted into the bracketry, so kind of nice. You only need to worry about one side. So we're gonna pull both these brackets, and then that will allow us to use our jack to lower and raise the entire axle assembly, and we'll kind of get the new brackets lined up, get our new bolts started, and put them in kind of by adjusting our jack up and down to make everything line up. And that's why I think doing both sides at the same time will make it a lot easier back here. It'll keep everything from kind of getting out of whack as we're trying to reinstall. So that's what I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna go ahead and get these 2 bolts out and pull this bracket out. All right, so we got the bracket off on both sides. And now with these new brackets, basically they're gonna set up here like so, kind of the long end to the top, short end, and then the cross member to the rear of the vehicle. So whenever I slide these up and in, you know, I can get the top in, but I'm gonna have to pull down pretty hard to get the bottom lined up. So one way to alleviate that, and since we're gonna be putting on our shock sliders anyway, is I'm gonna go ahead and remove the bolt from each of the shocks. Because right now, if I come down on the jack, I'm actually not even touching the axle. You know, you can see there, I got a gap between it. So I'm as low as I can go with the shocks connected. So that's what I'm gonna do next. Go ahead and remove the lower shock bolt, since we're gonna have to remove them here in a minute anyway. And that will allow me to drop this without having to fight it to get everything lined up. All right, so now after removing those shocks, all I had to do is just lower down the axle just enough. And now you can see our new bracket is in. Like I said, long side to the top, this cross member to the rear. And then we just reinstalled our new hardware. So we'll go ahead and get the other one on, and then we're gonna torque all of these bolts down to 118. All right, so this is the last thing that we got for this install. So this is the rear shock skid plates from 589. You'll notice on one side, you have this back hole here. That is gonna go to the inside here. You can see you got a hole on your shock bracket. So we're gonna line that up right there. And then we'll go ahead and put the supplied hardware to hold that kind of in place back there. And then the trickiest part of this whole install is getting your fingers in there and getting that nut started. All right, now we'll leave that finger tight back there, and that's kind of just holding our bracket in place. What we're gonna do next is go ahead and get our new supplied bolt. And on the stock shock bracket, the nut itself is welded to there. So they've kind of planned for all of that. So essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead and use their new bolt, which is longer, and you're gonna run it back in and mount your shock back up. Now the best way to do this is to have somebody lift up on the jack. Dad, will you jack the jack up?
Yeah.
So we're a little ways away from lining up, so I'm gonna just have I'm gonna raise the axle up until we're lined up. All right, so once you have the thread started into the factory nut, what we'll do is just kind of make sure that that bracket's all lined up. And make sure that on this back side, you can see the threads and see your nut, and make sure that that bolt's gonna come all the way through. All right, what we're gonna do next is we'll go ahead and torque this down to 118 foot-pounds. All right, so now you can see with this new bolt that was supplied, it's a lot longer. And inside there, you can see that factory welded nut. So we've already torqued this down to 118. Now they do supply this other extra nut, and that's where that's gonna go. So that's gonna go on there, and that basically is gonna help secure. Now you've got both sides of your bracket secure. So we'll go ahead and torque this down. Doesn't necessarily need to be 118. I'm just gonna snug it down real tight. I mean, I might get it close to 80, 90 foot-pounds. And then we'll come up here on the front. This is that back bolt. We'll go ahead and tighten that down, just get it all the way tight. And then that is it. So that is our rear shock skid plates fully mounted. So we'll get those on, and then we'll get our new wheels and tires on. We'll get this thing on the ground, and then we'll take some quick measurements and get him out of here. All right, so that is it. Man, kind of just did the whole works of this truck today, and I think it came out great. This truck looks really good. And these are, like I said, these are new tires, new wheels and tires. He had these in the back before we did the install, so our measurements that I'm about to get are gonna be a little bit skewed because we do have a bigger tire on the truck now. These are the exact same size that comes with the Bison, so they're the 315/70 R17. Same rim size as stock, just a bigger tire. A little bit wider offset as well. So we did lock to lock. We kind of checked everything out. It's close. Maybe if we get off road and do some articulating in that front end, we might have a little bit of rubbing issue. But where it's gonna rub is pretty easy to do some trimming if we needed to. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and get some final measurements for you, and then that way you can kind of get an idea of where we're at. So really what I'm looking for is just with the new wheels and tires, just kind of ballparking here. We should have about 3 inches of lift in the front and 2 in the rear. To me right now, it looks like the rear's setting up just a little bit higher. Hopefully we can, get this thing aligned, drive it a little bit, let everything settle in, kind of settle in where it's gonna be. And then if we really had to, we could get a little bit more preload out of it. But I don't think it's gonna be enough to make a difference, and it's just gonna make that ride a lot rougher. So all in all though, I'm very happy with it. The products from 589 Fab were awesome. If anybody's wanting to do a diff drop on their Colorado, I highly recommend the 589 stuff. Just a lot better way of doing it. Takes all that strain off of those bushings, and that was a super easy, quick install. And then again, everything from Level Up, yeah, phenomenal as usual. So no issues, fitment was perfect, everything looks great, and yeah, I don't really have any complaints with Level Up's suspension kit. So yep, let me get you set up. I'll get these final numbers real fast, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, let's get these final numbers here. So we're 1/8 of an inch under 41, so just almost right at 41. And then on the rear, we're right at about 42 3/4, a little bit under that. It's really kind of hard now because he's got the wider offset on the new wheels, and I can't get the tape measure tight to the fender flare like I did before. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm staying level. That not going to be an exact science there. All right, so those numbers might not be exact, but with that, we're looking at roughly, we got about 2.5 inches in the rear, and then we got about 2.5 inches in the front. Like I said, a lot of that's tire size. Yeah, maybe we didn't quite get our full 2 inches in the front as far as straight suspension. But all in all, I think it looks good. And once he gets it aligned, once he drives it a little bit, it could easily settle in some. So yeah, that wraps up this video. I hope that helped somebody out. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. And make sure you like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.